As I mentioned last week in my fantasy football sit and start video, feel welcome if you're having pressing lineup questions that you're unsure of heading into the weekend's games to either inbox me at the Schleg Daddy TV channel here on YouTube, or you can post them in the comments section down below too. I mean, that might be the easier way for you to do it. You could, if you don't want everybody else to see it, then you could sit there and inbox me, whatever the case might be. But I'm here to help the best way I possibly can. And look, bottom line is I'm going to get some right, and occasionally I'll get some wrong. That's just the nature of fantasy football, especially early on in the season. Teams are still trying to figure themselves out. Players are still trying to figure themselves out. So as a result, us as fantasy football players, we're still trying to figure things out too. Over the first 2 weeks that I've done this for you, both week 2 and week 3, like I said, I've had some hits and I've had some misses. So I'm hoping I can do a little bit better for you in week 4. I'm going to talk about players at quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, tight ends that you should sit or consider sitting, consider starting, and then talk about some guys you should be paying attention to on the waiver wire again, both for now and in the future. Let's look at the quarterback position first. We'll start off with guys you should consider sitting in week 4. Eli Manning of the New York Giants traveling to Arrowhead to take on the Kansas City Chiefs. I know I picked the Giants to win the game, but from a fantasy standpoint, Eli Manning is very risky right now. He could throw for 400 yards and 3 or 4 touchdowns, or he could have 5 turnovers. And you really don't want to get saddled with a quarterback in your fantasy starting lineup with 5 turnovers. There are better options on the waiver wire. A lot of you probably have a better option on your bench. Try and play them in week 4 over Eli Manning. Matt Schaub of the Houston Texans take on the Seattle Seahawks. This is a tough matchup. Andre Johnson is probably going to play, but is not 100%. And you've got perhaps the best all-around secondary between the 2 corners and the 2 safeties in the Seahawks and all of the NFL. It's a tough matchup for Matt Schaub in the passing game, and I don't anticipate him putting up huge numbers at all, so he's probably worth a sit if you've got him in your lineup. Andy Dalton of the Bengals taking on the Browns. For some reason, I just envision this kind of being an ugly game, maybe like a 17-13 type of matchup. It's a divisional rival. The teams are familiar with each other. As a result, I think you might not see big numbers coming out of Andy Dalton in the Bengals passing game in week 4. So consider putting him in on the bench too. Quarterbacks you should start. Can't believe I'm going to say this. Jay Cutler of the Chicago Bears traveling to Detroit to take on the Lions. Now, Cutler's numbers in week 3 were not all that impressive, but I do hope that Mark Trestman and the Bears coaching staff understand that in order to continue to win this year, they're going to have to utilize Cutler's arm strength, and they're going to have to air the ball out more. I envision Detroit having some trouble matching up with both Brandon Marshall and Martellus Bennett, and also Matt Forte out of the backfield in the passing game, which might open up the chance for Cutler to maybe throw for like 260 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns. He might be worth a start as long as he manages the game well and doesn't turn the ball over too much. RG3 of the Redskins traveling to Oakland and taking on the Raiders. RG3 is putting up okay fantasy numbers. You really don't care sometimes when you're looking at fantasy things. You don't really care about the overall strength or weaknesses of the team. You don't necessarily care about the team's win-loss record. You care about whether or not that quarterback is going to put up some good numbers. And RG3 should be able to put up decent numbers against an Oakland defense that still isn't all that good. And then Phillip Rivers of the San Diego Chargers taking on the Dallas Cowboys. For some reason, I think the Cowboys in week number 4 aren't going to play all that well, and I anticipate Rivers is going to have some success against that less than stellar Cowboys secondary. Now let's look at running backs, and starting off with the ones that you should sit. Until I tell you otherwise, continue to sit David Wilson every single week, regardless of how intriguing the matchup may or may not look. If you drafted David Wilson this year, right now, shame on you, and you are also learning a very valuable lesson. Don't put a lot of stock into Virginia Tech running backs. Did you learn your lesson? I hope you did. Continue to sit David Wilson until told otherwise. You look at C.J. Spiller of the Buffalo Bills. He's a little bit dinged up. It looks like he's going to play week 4, but he's pretty much locked into a 50-50 timeshare with Fred Jackson, and Spiller hasn't been all of that impressive so far in the 2013 season. There are better running backs probably on your bench that you could play in week 4, maybe with better matchups, and there are probably even better guys in your league's waiver wire that will put up more points than Spiller in week number 4. And then you look at Trent Richardson, the new Indianapolis Colt, taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. You might say, man, that looks like a wonderful matchup. Well, Richardson was outperformed, I feel, overall by Ahmad Bradshaw last week. And they're going to continue, at least for the time being, to be pretty much what I feel will be a 50-50 timeshare, at least for the next few weeks maybe. And when you look at this game, Ahmad Bradshaw might get 14, 15 carries, same as Trent Richardson. I just until you see more out of Trent Richardson, I'd hesitate just sliding him into your starting lineup and saying, man, this guy's going to put up big numbers for me. Now we'll look at running backs that you should consider starting a week number 4. Look at Bilal Powell of the New York Jets taking on the Tennessee Titans. He is, to me, their best all-around back that they have. He might not get a lot of carries at the goal line, but he's going to get opportunities in the running game, and he's also going to be good for you potentially in PPR leagues. So keep that in mind if you're looking for a running back that can get some additional points by getting some receptions out of the backfield, because Powell might be your man. Bernard Pierce of the Baltimore Ravens taking on the Buffalo Bills. Even if Ray Rice plays, which I doubt he will, he probably wouldn't play much, wouldn't be very effective. Pierce is going to get the lion's share of the carries in week 4. He didn't have a stellar game in week number 3, but, 50, 60 yards, a touchdown. When you're looking at guys on the waiver wire on the bottom of your bench and you plug them in and they give you double-digit points as a running back, what more can you really ask for? And that's what I'm going for here. Not just the guys it's easy to start, say, like, start Adrian Peterson. No, I'm trying to find guys that are kind of under the radar that you can plug in and they will help you out. And then you look at another guy like Jason Snelling of the Atlanta Falcons taking on the New England Patriots. I told you before week 3 to pick up Jason Snelling, to start Jason Snelling, and if you did, yeah, he didn't score a ton of points, but he got a touchdown out of it. You got, what, double digits out of him? Again, waiver wire pickup early in the season. You needed a running back. He's giving you something right now. He's a threat to get goal line carries, and he catches balls out of the backfield for the Atlanta Falcons. So he's somebody, along with Bilal Powell and Bernard Pierce, that you should consider, if they're on your waiver wire, picking them up, and at the very worst, consider inserting them into your lineup either in a running back or in a flex position for week number 4. Now let's look at the wide receiver position, starting off again with the ones you should consider sitting in week number 4. Vincent Jackson of the Buccaneers taking on the Arizona Cardinals. Josh Freeman's out at quarterback. Mike Glennon's in. He's a rookie. We don't know yet if that's an upgrade or not, but Vincent Jackson's also a little dinged up. And when you look at the potential matchup of going head-to-head with Patrick Peterson all day, I would not anticipate VJax putting up great numbers in week number 4. So go ahead and put him on your bench and feel relatively good about the decision. DeAndre Hopkins of the Houston Texans taking on the Seattle Seahawks. Andre Johnson may play, may not play, probably will play, but he's not 100%. So you might assume that DeAndre Hopkins is going to get more opportunities, more targets, more catches, more numbers, but he is going to go against either Richard Sherman or Brandon Brown, or either one of the stud corners for the Seattle Seahawks. It's not a good matchup. I'd consider looking at other options in week number 4. Roddy White of the Atlanta Falcons taking on the New England Patriots. I assume at some point in time that Roddy White is going to come back to being Roddy White, recovering from this high ankle sprain. But again, until proven otherwise, continue to sit him on your bench and just keep him there. And then Miles Austin of the Dallas Cowboys taking on the San Diego Chargers. I think he's dinged up. He may or may not even play. If he does, I think you have better options out there, either on your bench or, frankly, on the waiver wire. Wide receivers you should consider starting. Josh Gordon of the Cleveland Browns taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. Well, he's with the Browns, at least for the moment. We'll see whether or not he ends up getting traded. But in the meantime, he came back in week 3, had a nice day, 7 catches, 122 yards. He's easily the best target that the Browns have at wide receiver, easily. So he's going to get targets, he's going to get catches, he's going to put up numbers, and he's worth definitely a look and a start in week number 4. Santonio Holmes of the New York Jets taking on the Tennessee Titans. Geno Smith has done okay so far, not great, but okay. And Santonio Holmes is a nice, solid wide receiver 3 or flex play. And in a lot of leagues right now, him or Stephen Hill, either one of those two guys, I'll throw Stephen Hill in there as well. Either one of those guys are probably still on most of your waiver wires. If you're looking for somebody for a third wide receiver or a flex position, you could do a lot worse than Santonio Holmes. Another wide receiver, assuming that you get word that Terrell Pryor is going to play in week number 4 against that weak-ass Washington Redskins secondary, is Denarius Moore. He's Terrell Pryor's #1 target in the passing game. He had over 100 yards last week against the Denver Broncos. So if Pryor plays, if Pryor's healthy, Demarius Moore against that weak secondary in Washington is going to get opportunities, going to get looks, going to get targets, going to get catches, and put up some nice numbers for you. Moving on to tight ends, starting off with the ones you should consider sitting. Kyle Rudolph of the Minnesota Vikings taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Ponder hasn't been that good in the passing game. Rudolph, for some reason, doesn't get a lot of targets, which is disappointing to me because I think he's an incredibly talented player that is very underutilized in the Minnesota Vikings offense right now. As a result, I think there are better tight ends that could produce better numbers for you in week number 4, either on your bench or even on your league's waiver wire. Antonio Gates of the San Diego Chargers taking on the Cowboys. Gates is a Hall of Famer, but I don't think he's going to put up Hall of Fame numbers this week. I just don't feel like it's a good matchup for him. And Zach Miller of the Seattle Seahawks taking on the Houston Texans. I know Miller had a nice week last week, but to me that was a one-week fluke against the Jacksonville Jaguars, so don't overreact and don't bother starting him. Tight ends you should start in week number 4. Jordan Cameron of the Cleveland Browns taking on the Bengals. The Bengals have had some trouble matching up with tight ends. Look at what Martellus Bennett did in week number 1. Cameron's been on fire to start off the year. At some point in time, he may cool down a little bit, but he looks legit, and until he proves otherwise, you need to continue to start him every week. Coby Fleener of the Colts had a good week last week, and I anticipate he'll continue to have another strong performance against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who Zach Miller had a good game against last week. So I have no reason to believe that Fleener, now that Dwayne Allen is out for the year, isn't going to see an increase in his targets, an increase in his production, and is worth a start. Charles Clay, the Miami Dolphins, taking on the New Orleans Saints. I look at Clay. He's got some talent. I think he's a little underutilized and underprioritized in that Dolphin offense. Sure, they were originally anticipating having Dustin Keller be that number 1 tight end, but you have to deal with what you've got. And I think Charles Clay is going to continue to see, as the season goes along, more opportunities, more looks, and more focus on him in that Dolphins offense and passing game. Something that was a little lacking in week number 3. I think they may rectify that in week number 4, and he might be worth a play. Rob Gronkowski of the New England Patriots taking on the Atlanta Falcons. I think Gronkowski's going to play, assuming he does, assuming you get the word that he's active. Go ahead and plug him in. If you've had him on your bench for the first 3 weeks, you might as well plug him in there. Take the risk that with him coming back, that Brady's going to target him a lot. He's going to get red zone looks against a suspect Atlanta Falcons defense, and he's going to put up some monster numbers. So if you've held on to Gronkowski for this long, take the chance, plug him in your lineup as long as you get word that he's going to try and play, because you may end up reaping the benefits of it. Now let's talk about some guys on the waiver wire in your leagues that you should consider adding, either to help you right now or looking ahead more towards the second half of the season. The guys that aren't much of a player right now in their team's offense, but as the season progresses, they're going to get opportunities, they're going to get chances, and they're going to make the most of them. As it's important to remember, no matter how good you drafted, how well you drafted, it's very rare that you see a fantasy team stay 100% intact from beginning to end. And that doesn't even factor in if you didn't draft all that well and you're in a league maybe where people aren't willing to trade or they're unreasonable in the trades. You have to utilize the waiver wire. There are players there usually that can help you, and you got to find them, you got to identify them. Looking at quarterbacks, Ryan Tannehill of the Miami Dolphins, E.J. Manuel of the Buffalo Bills, Geno Smith of the New York Jets. These are young quarterbacks that as the season progresses could end up getting better and better and produce like top 15 quarterbacks, which if you're looking for a backup quarterback to cover a bye week, or you're not that sold on your starter, maybe your starter right now is somebody like an Eli Manning or maybe a Joe Flacco, and you're not sure how they're going to do all year long, maybe one of these young bucks would be worth an addition at this point in time. Running backs you should look at right now. A lot of people, once Trent Richardson was traded to the Colts, probably dropped Ahmad Bradshaw. He might be worth a pickup. If Richardson gets hurt, which he has a tendency to do sometimes, Bradshaw's back to being a starter. He's still going to get opportunities right now in Indianapolis, so it might be worth a flex play for you. Brandon Bolden of the New England Patriots. He gets some opportunities out of the backfield as a pass catcher. He gets carries in that three-headed kind of committee they've got in New England. If you desperately need a running back, take a flyer on somebody like Bolden. Jason Snelling of the Atlanta Falcons. And if Steven Jackson's still out a few more weeks, you need help right now, he might be a guy that can come in, vulture some goal line touchdowns, get a few catches, so he adds some value in PPR leagues. Le'Veon Bell of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Looks like he's healthy finally. He's going to play. He's going to start in week number 4 for the Steelers against the Vikings. You know, you're looking for a feature back. Nobody else in Pittsburgh's really done anything out of the backfield so far this year. You can do a lot worse than Le'Veon Bell. If he's on your waiver wire, you need a starting running back. You know he's probably going to be the feature back. That's always what you're looking for. I'd rather get a weak team's number 1 running back as opposed to a strong team's number 2, because that feature back is still a feature back that gets the majority of the carries. And then Bilal Powell of the New York Jets is somebody right now, even with Ivory there in the backfield, I think Powell is a better running back overall. I think he's more skilled overall, and as a result, he's going to get more overall opportunities and adds value in a PPR league. Running backs to keep your eye on for later on in the year. Isaiah Pead of the St. Louis Rams. I think Daryl Richardson is going to start to show as the year continues to go along more and more why he was the 7th round pick and the second to last pick in the 2012 draft. Pead was drafted in the 2nd round of that draft. He's a more talented player. At some point in time, I think he's going to get it together. He's going to get an opportunity, and he might be more of the big type of feature back that Jeff Fisher loves to have in his offense. So, somebody that might not really pay off for you until week 7, 8, 9, and beyond, but he might be somebody worth stashing right now. Andre Ellington of the Arizona Cardinals, kind of the same thing. Mendenhall's a starter right now. Alfonso Smith gets some carries. But, Ellington right now is the number 2 man in that backfield, and with his ability in the passing game to do some damage there and his explosiveness overall, I think it might not be too long before he becomes the lead back in that Arizona Cardinals offense. Jonathan Franklin of the Green Bay Packers. If you're not sold fully on Eddie Lacy or James Starks being productive all year long or being healthy, maybe a guy like Jonathan Franklin, who showed a lot in week number 3, is worth a stash on your bench for later on in the year. And even somebody like Jonathan Stewart. You could say, oh, God, Jonathan Stewart, he's that ultimate flex play. One week he gets you 20 points, the next week he gets you 2. This is true. But if your running backs suck and you drafted poorly, you might not have any other choice. If Stewart comes back week number 7, maybe he gives you a couple of really good weeks throughout the rest of the season. I'm just saying, wide receivers, Santonio Holmes of the New York Jets, Stephen Hill of the New York Jets, Sidney Rice of the Seattle Seahawks, Denarius Moore of the Oakland Raiders, Cordero Patterson is somebody that you should be considering right now. When I'm talking about guys, the first 4 guys I mentioned, talk about adding that could help you now. Some of the guys that can help you later, you look at a Cordero Patterson, because I think he's going to continue to get more opportunities as the season progresses, because Minnesota can't possibly be that stupid, can they? He's 6'4" and he can fucking fly. Get the ball in his damn hands. Percy Harvin, I'd expect him back sometime in mid-season. He's an explosive player. And with other pieces around him, and with a good quarterback and Russell Wilson throwing him the ball, he could put up some nice numbers. Guys like Justin Blackmon. This is the last week of his suspension. He's coming back. He's a number 1, number 2 receiver in Jacksonville. That might not say a whole lot, but if you're really hurting at wide receiver for flex players, you could do worse than Justin Blackmon. Justin Hunter of the Tennessee Titans, he caught the game-winning touchdown pass in week number 3. I think he's going to move his way into the rotation more and more as the season progresses. Kenny Britt is being shoved on the way out. So Hunter's another guy to keep your eye on. And even like a Ruben Randall, the New York Giants, if Victor Cruz and or Hakeem Nicks gets hurt, Randall's going to be the guy, and I think he's a nice explosive weapon that you need to keep your eye on, especially, again, if you're hurting at wide receiver. So, again, if you have any questions about your lineup for this week, be sure, by all means, to either inbox me or, even better, post them in the comments section down below. If you want my thoughts on any other waiver pickups that you should or shouldn't do, be sure to post that in the comment section down below. Let's see how successful I am in helping you for week number 4 of this fantasy football season.